This is the JE Podcast, brought to you by the Philadelphia Jewish Exponent and its parent company, Mid-Atlantic Media. This episode originated from the Philadelphia Jewish Exponent's sister publication, The Washington Jewish Week.
Welcome to the WJW Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Trudler. I'm joined today by Adam Lehman. Adam is the president and CEO of Hillel International, the largest Jewish student organization in the world. A graduate of Dartmouth College and Harvard Law School, Adam spent time working in the legal field, and he's also been an executive and an entrepreneur for a period of time. Adam is also very involved in the Jewish art scene, having written a series of plays inspired by the Jewish holidays, and he was also a founding member of the Washington, D.C.-based Jewish a cappella group, Jukebox. Adam Lehman, thank you for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Aaron. And just to clarify, my main job is as a singer in Jukebox. The Hillel gig is kind of a side hustle, like 120-hour-week side hustle.
Yeah, I understand that. All right, so let's talk a little bit, Adam, about your background. From my standpoint, your background is somewhat unique for a professional in the Jewish communal sphere. I mentioned you graduated from Harvard Law. You worked at a major international law firm. I mentioned your time as an executive and an entrepreneur. Can you talk a little bit about how you ended up as president and CEO of Hillel International?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll start by saying it has been such an honor and privilege to be able to serve in this role. But it was a very surprising turn of events in terms of finding my way to Hillel now almost 9 years ago. I had been, for the 20 years before that, really focused in the technology and media world, working first at AOL for many years as we built that into a real business before it kind of went in the other direction and became a non-business. And then working on several startup projects in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. In my personal life, I was very involved Jewishly through our synagogue, through the Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School, through the Camp Ramah system, through Federation, through APAC, all sorts of different points of engagement and affiliation, but that really had not crossed over into my professional life until spring of 2015, when I was in the process of starting a new software venture and got a recruiter call from someone at Spencer Stewart, at that point recruiting for the chief operating officer role at Hillel International. And my first response was naturally, do you have the wrong number? Because it just, again, I hadn't been working in the Jewish communal space, so it just didn't feel like it was so obvious that I would be a candidate for that type of role. But once we clarified that, in fact, they were interested in talking to me as a candidate, for me, it became increasingly compelling for several reasons. Number one, just because of my passion for Jewish life and my overall interest in seeing a stronger Jewish community over time. Number two, I had had a wonderful Hillel experience as an undergrad at Dartmouth. It had really opened my eyes to different ways to think about Jewish engagement, and just been a great sense of support. My freshman year, I lost my grandmother to cancer, who I was very close with, and the then Hillel Rabbi Michael Paley, reached out to me, was just a great support at a pastoral level, and I became very involved in our Jewish community on campus at that time. So I understood not only the impact and value of Hillel, but I really felt aligned with our philosophy of pluralistic approaches to building a vibrant Jewish community. And on top of all of that, there were two other factors that for me were meaningful. Number one, I had two daughters who at that point were in high school at Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School. So we as a family were beginning to think about college and what that would entail, and in all respects, including in terms of their Jewish lives. And on top of all of that, even looking from more of a business perspective, I knew that Hillel had this incredible heritage At that point, 90 plus years of Hillel being on college campuses, a really well-respected brand, but it was my sense that Hillel had not capitalized on its full potential as a network and as a potential change maker in the Jewish world. So with all that as motivation, I went ahead and took the plunge and joined Hillel and really have never looked back.
Taking that a step further, Adam. So the work that Hillel does, and you mentioned when you came on, it was 90 plus years, where we've eclipsed 100 years of Hillel's existence at this point. And, Hillel is well known and well regarded as an organization that facilitates the celebration of Jewish life on university campuses, and it provides many opportunities for Jewish college students to embrace Jewish life and Jewish values. Can you talk a little bit about the work that Hillel has done over the past century and bringing it to the current time frame, your vision for the organization moving forward?
Yeah, for sure. I think as we look back over 100 years of Hillel, and we did just celebrate our centennial, Hillel stands out for the reason you mentioned. We have been the primary and dominant platform on campuses where Jewish students have been able to find community and grow their Jewish identities. One of the things that was fascinating about celebrating the centennial was going back and looking at the founding documents for Hillel. The first Hillel was created by Rabbi Benjamin Frankel at the University of Illinois. And even at that point in 1923, Rabbi Frankel captured so much of what we're still about today. Number one, creating that safe space for Jewish students. And unfortunately, I'm sure we'll talk about this, that notion of a safe, inclusive space has become even more relevant today than for many of the decades Hillel's existed. But number two, he had a pluralistic vision. He said this is not about one type of Jewish student or even one type of Jewish experience. He wanted to create an environment where Jewish students could engage in ritual practice and celebrate Shabbat and holidays, but also engage in learning and engage in Jewish learning from wherever they started, whether, as yeshiva bookers who really had a deep knowledge of Jewish text and wisdom, or for Jewish students who had almost no background. So, and he even had the foresight to think about how Hillel could engage with the broader Jewish community. So those elements of Jewish celebration, of Jewish learning, of engaging with the broader campus community and world have continued throughout our 100 years to be a core part of what we do and how we drive impact. What is different today, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're looking at going forward, is that we moved from, if you look in the middle of the 20th century, we moved from being a niche organization that really primarily served Jewish students who were highly affiliated and wanted to be able to live a Jewish life on campus, to actually a much more ambitious vision for Hillel, which said, we want to be there for every Jewish student, and in some senses, for every student who wants to engage Jewishly. And that meant several things. It meant that we had to be a much more robust organization. So we went from, again, in the even 60s, 70s, 80s, a rabbi on campuses, to having teams of professionals who are able to support all different kinds of Jewish life engagement on various campuses. It also meant that we had to widen the scope of our programming. So instead of simply thinking about Shabbat, holidays, and the occasional social program or learning program, we're doing everything that Jewish students care about and think about. That means we have a lot of work in the community service realm. It means that we have a lot of work in the mental health and wellness space where students have needs that are not being met and want to be supported in that way. It means that we're doing a lot of work globally connecting young Jews around the world. It means that we think about things like civic engagement and what that looks like from a Jewish point of view. And of course, all sorts of other kind of fun ways that Jewish students just let steam off, whether it's online gaming together or uh, trivia, or we bring puppies in because people need to de-stress. It really is anything that can make the lives of Jewish students better on campus. Good news is it means that we have gone from engaging, again, a meaningful niche, but small percentage to, we'll have close to 200,000 Jewish students engaged with Hillel this year, or 200,000 total students. Vast majority are Jewish, but we do have students coming from other faith backgrounds who just want to get involved in a Jewish community. The challenge is, it means that we require a lot of talent and resource to be able to meet all of those different needs. I'll round out the answer by speaking about prospectively what is my vision and really our vision for what Hillel can and should be. First and foremost, we are and want to continue to be a wonderful place to celebrate Jewish identity. Behind me, there's a tagline, all kinds of Jewish. We are leaning into what so much of the community has run away from, which is the idea that there isn't one way to be Jewish. There are a million ways to be Jewish, and we want to support proud Jewish identities that are able to meet the needs of incredibly diverse students who either come from Jewish backgrounds or find their way to Jewish life. So that's number one. Number two, to accomplish that, we actually need to spend more time working on the overall campus environment, because unfortunately, we've seen a degraded campus climate over the past really 30 years or so, bound up in a lot of demonization of Israel on campus, but that has bled into so much just challenge for Jewish students to be Jewish on campus. So we're doing a lot more to improve the overall campus climate. So there is a framework where a Jewish student can feel comfortable living Jewishly, expressing themselves Jewishly, including in relation to Israel. And the other kind of additional condition of us being successful is we have to be constructive agents of positive change. And that means leaning into experimentation around what Jewish life can be. And to be really clear, that doesn't mean that we're simply trying to throw overboard 3,000 years of Jewish practice, history, tradition, and wisdom. It means we're trying to find the new ways to tap into it that are consonant with the reality of life for most young people today. I'll give one example and then hand the mic back to you. But we're doing a lot in community colleges. Most people don't realize that the fastest growing Jewish student populations are at commuter and community institutions. And so one of those in New York, Hunter College, they created Thursday night Shabbat, because with commuter students, they weren't around Friday night. It's not like a residential school. And of course, halakhically, they do the steps they need to do to make sure no one's confused that it's Shabbat, but it does become a really meaningful way to still bring in the joy of community that so many of us take advantage of for Shabbat, but in a way that actually works for students of today.
That last point you made, Adam, about the community colleges, I wasn't aware of that. That's actually really interesting, and I guess it addresses, a need that perhaps historically has been overlooked. I think it's a great expansion of Hillel's efforts. I want to turn to something that you've alluded to a couple times during the course of your remarks, and that we're all aware of in terms of the current situation on college campuses relative to anti-Semitism. And as you mentioned, the situation on college campuses vis-a-vis anti-Semitism in Israel, it's not necessarily a new thing. It's gone back quite a number of years and decades. But ever since October 7th, and as the Israel-Hamas war continues, it seems like there's just an explosion, so to speak, of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment on college campuses. In terms of the universities themselves, how can they and how should they address these issues? And what steps could they and should they take to better protect Jewish students and perhaps help make them feel safer on college campuses?
Yeah, great questions, and needless to say, questions that we spend a lot of time helping university partners to answer, and also filling in to make sure Jewish students are supported and protected, regardless of whether their university is doing the right thing or not. I think it's important to start with what these issues are not about. They're not about free speech. And it's interesting because if you listen to media or a lot of commentary in this really complicated year, people will focus on, but no, we need to create free speech so that everyone has the ability to express their views. We're all for that at Hillel. I think I can speak broadly that most people involved in Jewish life on campus and beyond are all for free expression and free speech. The issues that Jewish students have encountered have been about conduct. They've been about vandalism or targeted threats and harassment or even assault. And so people need to realize the issues to solve are really about conduct more than speech, number one. Number two, what happens on campus is not about solving for peace in the Middle East. If only it were, right? If we had all of that energy focused on how to actually create constructive solutions, maybe there would be some benefit from it. Instead, it ends up just channeling, as we see it, a lot of agendas from certain players in the Middle East and here in North America, but in a way that just breeds a lot of division, polarization, even hate. And that's obviously a really bad thing. So knowing, though, when you properly diagnose what's going on, it does point to what universities can and should do. Number one, universities need to have clear policies that are about protecting their campus climate for all students. And one of the failures this year has been a lack of urgency in terms of how many universities have approached that need. Now, fortunately, we've had a lot of universities that have, and this was true very quickly after October 7th, when we saw, ironically, in a sad way, anti-Israel activism escalate, right? I mean, this is 10/7. We're talking 10/8, 10/9, 10/10. It wasn't about Gaza and the war. It was on the heels of this horrible catastrophe and terrorism in Israel that we started to see this. But we fortunately did see some universities step up, speak up for Jewish students, and make sure that they were keeping control on these otherwise out of control protest activities. The second thing we need universities to do is actually enforce the policies they have. Again, one of the disappointments, and it's not surprisingly associated with the schools that have had some of the biggest issues, is that you have students and non-students clearly violating the policies, codes of conduct of the university, and in many cases violating just law, local, state, and federal. And universities are not enforcing the policy. And that, that's so problematic. It makes Jewish students and other students feel less safe. And it allows the people who are crossing lines to just continue unabated and feel emboldened in the process. So critical that you have that kind of enforcement. And then finally, universities need to recenter themselves. Like, I don't know who came up with the idea that universities should be, the central spot for political protest, and specifically political protest when it comes to Israel. But, newsflash, universities are supposed to be places of learning, growing, community, and it's on university administrators to actually promote and foster better education, better dialogue across difference. I will say, just quickly, and happy to add to this, but that as Hillel, we've been doing a lot to try to solve at every one of these levels. We have a campus climate initiative partnering with universities to help them improve their policies when it comes to maintaining a safe and welcoming campus climate. Where universities have not been willing to play ball, we partnered with other organizations to bring Title VI actions or find other ways to ensure accountability. We have also brought Israel education to campus, because so many campuses, they have all sorts of demonization and propaganda as it relates to Israel and Jews, and this dearth of actual education about these topics that people are otherwise so obsessed with. And so we've brought great analysts and educators who come from all sorts of political stripes and perspectives, but at least are adding to knowledge rather than just to vitriol and polarization. And finally, we've also brought facilitators to campus to promote dialogue across difference, and we're going to continue to invest, in those directions as well.
Okay, yeah. One final question, Adam, if I may, and just that idea of taking constructive action and trying to recenter, refocus the universities to their core mission, i.e., learning. When you have a prospective parent of a prospective college student, high school junior, senior right now, who is seeking out college opportunities and visiting different colleges, and perhaps many of them are concerned these days in terms of what's currently going on, what sort of advice would you give them? What sort of guidance would you give them in their decision-making process?
It's a big question for really every family that is Jewishly affiliated at this point. I speak to families every day now who have sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school trying to sort those questions out. Number one, I think the most important thing is perspective. So don't get into the game of trying to figure out, are there 3 schools, 5 schools, 10 schools that are okay for Jews, and everything else must be treif, everything else must be unsafe and horrible. That's not the reality. The reality is there are issues almost everywhere, but there are also many other variables that impact the kind of experience a student will have. We offer a college guide that people can find at hillel.org with a lot of information on more that holistic sense of, okay, how many Jewish student organizations are present on that campus? Is kosher food available? Are there Jewish Greek organizations? How active and large is the Jewish student population? Like, there are lots of ways to look at Jewish life apart from these issues. And then you can look at the issues, but try to, as a family, take a dispassionate view. Again, don't look for a place that has no issues, because it's a fool's errand, or it will change between now and the time your son, daughter, student arrives. Look for how issues have played out, how responsive the administration has been. And, I'm biased, but I'd say look for a great Hillel, because then that someone has the back of your student under the tough times, but someone's also creating joyful, positive, inspiring Jewish life and overall life opportunities. So Hillel College Guide can point in that direction. And then once you narrow your list, talk to Jewish students and Jewish professionals on those campuses. Our Hillel professionals are always willing to give tours or talk to prospective students and families, and they'll give people straight answers on what's going on. But the other final piece of this is, every family listening should know we are working tirelessly to fix the problem. So I really hope that, notwithstanding forces beyond our control, politically in the Middle East and otherwise, that we can ensure safer, healthier environments for Jewish students everywhere. Because I want every Jewish student and family to be able to find the best fit for them. If they want to do a conservatory program at Rochester, which is great for violin, I don't want them to say, oh, but there was a BDS campaign, or, we can come up with 100 other examples. We're going to make it so every student, still has the full field of choices. That's the goal.
Hey, Adam Lehman, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. And again, I hope anyone listening has a chance to go see a Hillel. Even if you graduated long ago, be in touch with your Hillel. They're always appreciative of hearing from folks from years ago, and they're always looking for words of support or support otherwise.